Tomorrow, President Obama will deliver a speech on climate change, which, according to the White House, will outline the president's vision for a comprehensive plan to reduce carbon pollution, prepare our country for the impacts of climate change, and lead global efforts to fight it. End of quote. In tomorrow's speech, it's expected that the president will announce new emission rules for existing power plants in the country, and that could be a very big deal, because existing power plants in the U.S. account for nearly 40% of all carbon emissions in our country. The new standards, expected to be unveiled, would, for all practical purposes, signal the beginning of the end of conventional coal-fired power in America. But if President Obama really wants to do what's necessary to save our planet, he needs to propose a carbon tax. Right now, the fossil fuel industry is the only industry in America that doesn't have to pay to have its waste disposed of. That waste is known as carbon dioxide. As a result of their not paying to dispose of it, you and I are forced to pay the costs for their waste. Costs that come in the form of massive disaster cleanup efforts, species lost across the world, and the possibility even of the eventual extinction of most life on Earth. In an interview with Jeff Godell for Rolling Stone magazine, Professor Harold Wanless, the chair of the University of Miami's Geological Sciences Department, said that if we continue to do nothing to fight the devastating effects of climate change, the city of Miami could be completely devastated. Wanless said that thanks to climate change and rising ocean levels, Miami is on its way to becoming the American version of the lost city of Atlantis. The professor went on to say that it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Miami, as we know it today, is doomed. And Miami isn't just some isolated cautionary tale on the effects of global warming and climate change. All across our nation, climate change is already having disastrous effects on cities and communities, and those effects will continue to get worse if we continue to do nothing. Miami won't be the only city underwater. Some way of accounting for the real costs of carbon are desperately needed if we want to have any hope of combating the greatest threat that this planet has ever faced. Meanwhile, while we're paying the costs for the fossil fuel industry's waste, that same industry is shelling out millions to lawmakers in Washington in attempts to ensure that they're never forced to pay for their own waste cleanup. But it won't be easy to stop. Oil and gas companies have doled out more than $238 million to political candidates and parties since 1980, and of that $238 million, 75% has gone to Republicans. According to the Center for Responsive Politics, in the 2011-2012 election cycle, big oil giant Chevron Corporation spent more than $3.8 million on campaign donations, while ExxonMobil spent another $2.7 million. And to make matters even worse, big oil benefits from over $4 billion in tax breaks every year, and estimates suggest that annual fossil fuel industry subsidies range anywhere from $10 billion to $52 billion every year. The easiest way to stop this damage to our planet is by introducing a carbon tax. As soon as a carbon tax is applied, all of the clean and green energy alternatives to fossil fuels become economically viable, while fossil fuels become more expensive. As a result, the fossil fuel industry will almost be forced to invest in cleaner and greener forms of energy in order to stay in business. Imposing a carbon tax is nothing new either. The European Union has had a carbon market in place since 2005, and China is working feverishly to establish a national carbon emissions cap and trade program. In fact, that nation just launched its first carbon cap and trade program in the highly industrialized city of Shenzhen. The stakes are high. The fate of planet Earth versus money from the fossil fuel industry. So, Mr. President, when you walk up to the stage tomorrow at Georgetown, are you truly serious about addressing the issues of climate change and global warming? If you are, you need to propose a carbon tax and put an end to our nation's toxic addiction to fossil fuels. Let's put the interests of the big oil industry aside and put the price on carbon to help preserve the future of the only planet we're able to call home.